Chairs do make you feel like you're a little, like I'm a little boy out. Yeah.
Then we should be on.
Good.
Might have to speak a little loud, but I gotta let me know how to adjust everything up.
Yeah, if you can hear us, then we ain't worried about it. If you see us live, then what about our sound? We could.
Let's see.
Because the TVs are they fine.
I don't even think they're in the way. So
I can hear you.
you can hear us good? Great. Well, we want to first of all say good evening to everyone. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join in with us for Let's Talk. I like to call this edition Let's Talk Fatherhood, Manhood. I think it's very important for us to kind of, as men, to discuss and have this talk. And I'm excited and grateful and thankful to have some real men in here with me on today. First, I want to say thank you to Floyd and to my brother Marley for allowing us the opportunity to host it here at your place, man. This is nice. The barber, man, he take care of us as well. Then right here I have Marley. I have everybody know him, Mr. Terry Simmons. We're grateful and thankful for him being with us. And then we have Floyd Mayfield on the other end. And walking in the door right now is Dr. Mark Ellis. And we're grateful and thankful for him joining in with us as well. Come on in, Doc. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Bless you, bless you, bless you. I think it's real important, guys, for us to have this talk. You know, as men, sometimes we don't get a chance to really do this, but I think it's necessary, especially in the climate that we're in right now, being able to have real talk. And so I didn't want to do it in a church setting. I want to really be at a barbershop. And so this is real good shop talk. And so I'm going to just start off, let you guys, I kind of introduce you, but I'll let you all introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive right in and have some talk. We'll start to my left.
Yes, absolutely. Pastor Mark Ellis, pastor of United Christian Faith Ministries here in the city of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Been pastoring 20 years this month, celebrating 20 years of pastorate, 20 years of being a husband. I have 4 children, 17, 16, 14, and 12.
Yeah.
3 teenagers and 1 adolescent. So I moved here from Atlanta, Georgia 21 years ago on a 1-year job assignment, met my wife, and God gave me a vision for a church. We started a ministry in my living room, and here we are later, 20 years later, celebrating 20 years of marriage and ministry at the same time. So
Awesome, man.
glad to be here. I'm retired. I worked at Pitney Bowes for 20-something years as a vice president, and now I do consulting work and full-time pastor.
Awesome. We appreciate you, and thank you for being here.
My name is Clifford Seller Jr. I go by the name of Marley the Barber. I've been cutting since high school, born and raised in Tickle, Louisiana. I have 1 daughter and a stepdaughter. She's my daughter's 14, my stepdaughter's 7. Been here about 2.5 years. Left offshore, working offshore for 10 years. So yeah, finally gave it up, took a leap of faith, and been here ever since.
Awesome.
Terry Simmons. I'm the founder and managing director of T. Simmons and Company. It's a brand development, organizational development, and workforce development firm located in Baton Rouge. Got 2 daughters. One that is, you never know when they're in college, they tell you they're about to graduate, but in the next semester or 2, she'll be graduating from Central Baptist in Conway, Arkansas. She's up there on a basketball scholarship. A younger daughter just graduated from Liberty High School in Baton Rouge, and she'll be at Columbia College in Columbia, South Carolina on a volleyball scholarship. So I got 2 daughters. That means I don't have no money. That's how that works. They take it all.
Definitely. Well, my name is Floyd Mayfield. I'm from Gadsden, Louisiana, from Central Parish. Born and raised, married to my beautiful wife, Shamika Mayfield. We have 2 children, Cameron and Carson, 14 and 7. Me and my wife, we co-own, share the Ben Guru Salon. I've been here for about 4 years. And I'm just grateful to share this stage with awesome men. You know, it's just a privilege and an honor to do so. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, man. And, thank you all once again. I want to dive right in. When we talk about manhood, fatherhood, where are you all with that? What does that mean to you, being a father and being a man? What that mean to you, Terry?
Man, that's a complex question.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I can remember when I became a father, what that range of emotions was. Obviously, it comes, with a deep sense of responsibility. It's a persistent, thing where you never feel like you have enough financial security. You never feel like you have enough, of anything, right? Because you know the gravity of your responsibility. But I'll say, I think fatherhood, what it did for me was that it sharpened my instincts, it improved my decision making, it made me much more empathetic and selfless, and I think it's one of the largest contributing factors to whatever success that I have accomplished. Because at the end of the day, it keeps you grounded, it keeps you extremely focused. If you understand the gravity of the responsibility, and so I try to just keep it narrowed down to three things: spiritual leadership, security, and providing. That's the three things. I can remember the first time I held my youngest daughter, and she cried and cried and cried. And the first time I was with her alone, she cried. And she was inconsolable, and I was like, okay, but when she's with her mom, of course, she got God-given assets where she can, console her. So I'm like, all right, I see what my role is in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It didn't take long to figure that out. So, that's the way I approach it. I just try to model spiritual leadership, make sure everybody's safe, and make sure everybody can eat.
Yes. Awesome. What about yourself?
To reflect on that, I feel like I was a father at a young age. I was in high school, so I had to man up early.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing for me was telling my father that I was going to have a child in high school. So all my dreams and college, all that just kind of went down the drain, which I still could have went, but he told me and he taught me that, it's go time.
Yeah.
I was crying down, tears falling all over my shirt, man. But he told me, look, it's time to man up.
Yeah.
It's time to get it together. You got a child, now you got to do what you got to do. So, you got to put yourself in position. That's why I started working straight out of high school. You got to put yourself in position where you provide for your child, and by any means do whatever you can to provide for that child, to make a life, a better life for them than what you probably had.
What about you, Dr. Ellis?
So I agree with the commentary from my brothers here. Biblically speaking, manhood is the highest state a man can ascend to. Just because you have a child does not mean you have ascended to fatherhood. It's just like you might be 18 or 21. That means you reach the state of manhood, the state of being. And not to be overly technical about the words, but you understand kind of where I'm going. Therefore, if we embrace the concept of fatherhood, then fatherhood is a privilege that God gives us to father his creation, right? And then you consider the roles God defines for a father in the Word of God, biblically speaking, again, God being the ultimate father, right? The role for us is the role of a prophet, where we have to speak over our children. We help give them identity, right? We give clarity in the midst of uncertainty. It's that of a priest. We're consoling. We represent God the Father to them, and we represent them to God the Father. We bring them to God. We pray for them. That's a priestly role, right? And then that of a king. You talked about that provider. Your children look up to you. You're the king. As a little boy growing up, no one was stronger or bigger than my daddy. We'd have school conversations in elementary about whose daddy was the strongest. Who daddy made the most money, worked the hardest, that type of thing. because, my father carried himself in a way that I saw him as a king.
Yeah.
And I think that is the mantle God gives to us if we're willing to receive it. Our hearts are open. And so that's fatherhood. I've grown in it.
Yeah.
To my brother's point earlier, it's humbling, right? It keeps you grounded, as you said earlier. And that's my perspective initially on fatherhood.
Great.
Yes. So, well, fatherhood to me is pretty much when it's all down to a nutshell, it's the ultimate sacrifice, like what it said.
Yeah.
It's selfishness, listeners.
Yeah.
So when it boils down to me, when my children, when I think about them, it's never about myself first. I'm thinking about their needs and providing not just financial standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint, from a loving standpoint. A lot of people, of course, mother gonna give it up, but fathers give it up too. From a supporter standpoint, being at the cheerleading practice, games and basketball games, football games, being that emotional support system for our children. So I knew for me personally, when it came to the moment when I held my children in my hand, I knew what I do is going to be for them. And everything as far as the sacrifices and support is going to be for them. So it took me from one place into a whole nother place mentally, as far as manning up to the responsibility.
Yeah, that's good.
Is it safe to say, when we talk about fatherhood and manhood as well, that sometimes we're identified by roles based on sometimes too our upbringing on what we saw growing up, and is it also safe to say now that some of those roles have shifted?
Yes.
Right. Growing up, we saw mostly when men we went out and worked, right? I saw my dad would go out and work. Mom pretty much would stay at home. But now when we look at the society we live in now, the culture we live in now, you have women. Some women are going out and some men are staying in. So the roles have changed. How has those roles affected our society or culture, you think? I say it.
Well, I'll say this. So all of the evolution that's taken place in terms of liberating women, because that's what's happened over the last 60 or 70 years. Women were dealing with their own form of oppression. And obviously black women was, it was double, right? Because you're a double minority. So the strides that they're making in corporate America, societal strides, political strides, all of that stuff is positive. I think sometimes as a society, when we try to correct one thing, there's an overcorrection that disrupts something else. I know y'all know
That's
what's going
good. Yeah.
So in trying to position and empower women, and again, I have 2 daughters, so I'm all about that. But to a certain extent, manhood has become stigmatized. And I had a debate not long ago, a healthy debate. It wasn't an argument on social media not long ago about the concept of toxic masculinity. And I'm like, if it's toxic, then by default, it's not masculinity.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that's some of what's playing out right now. We're trying to figure out as a society, how much of, what happened pre-1960s do we want to take with us into the next millennium?
Right.
And what do we want to leave behind? And so okay, if your wife makes 150 grand and you're a 5th grade teacher that only makes 40, you still have to hold the same position in your house and your community. That responsibility doesn't change based on what you earn necessarily. And so I think there's some positives going on, but I also think there's some overcorrections as well.
I totally agree. What'd you say to that, Doc?
No, I agree completely. I was reading an article on feminism and the movement. There's always movements in society, in particular, as the culture changes. Culture is decided by what leadership pays attention to and or what it fails to pay attention to. That's formal leadership, whether it's corporate leadership, the marketplace, the synthesis of business, government, and education. Those leaders, what they define as important, what's not. And then informal leaders, fathers in the home, mothers in the home, community leaders, what we define as important. Some of the challenges we face today is because of the passivity of men. Not to be, again, overly technical, but I can be biblical here because that's my passion. If you look in the Garden of Eden, Adam's the sin of passivity, the sin of inaction. The Bible says Eve was deceived, Adam wasn't.
Right.
God had already given him the instruction. That ain't your buddy. I done laid down what the expectation is, and he couldn't live up to the expectation. And of course, once he gave in to the deception, then he turned around and blamed the woman. But God had already established his order, right?
Yeah.
That man would be created from the ground, and he's going to pull the woman out of the man. He didn't go back to the dust to make her. He wanted there to be a sense of oneness. He made the male first because the male is the seed carrier. In every male is a nation, seed.
Yeah.
There is no life without seed.
Yeah.
And so it does not mean that the male is more important than the woman, but God, in his infinite wisdom, wanted a correct picture of himself. And he didn't have it with just the male. You don't see God until you see manhood and womanhood. You see masculinity and femininity, if you will. You see both coming together. Now you have the correct picture of God, because there can be no reproduction in the earth without man and woman.
Yes.
God is self-existent. He can reproduce within himself. But also God is obsessed with oneness. He exists in three. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So God created the established order. We get off when we don't pay attention to order. And we can't self-correct until we go back to the established order, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's our challenge today. What ideology will we embrace to fix our pain? Because at the same time, to my brother's point, we have tremendous gains in the marketplace, but we have tremendous losses in the institution called the family.
Yeah.
Because it's there children find identity, self-worth, and security. And we see many are seemingly searching for it, coming out of houses, but not homes. So they're searching for identity. That's why there's so much experimentation going on. I don't know who I am today. And so the government is all but say you can be a man today and a woman tomorrow and come back and change it next week. Identity. Fathers define their children. If the seed come out of me, it's my job to tell you.
I agree.
My daddy told me at 13 years old, you a man, boy.
Yeah.
I ain't giving you nothing.
Right.
He treated me like a man.
Right.
When I saw him, I saw myself.
Right.
Does it make sense? And it's the same for a father giving his daughter identity. Because if he don't, it's a high probability she's going to struggle to find that identity. And she may look for it in the wrong places. In the wrong person.
What happens when you just stated, the father is the one that gives that identity, but what happens when the father is absent? You see what I'm saying?
Another challenge. Exactly.
Yes, that's even a deeper challenge. And when I say absent, a father can be present in the home and yet still be absent.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that even myself as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a pastor and all that, trying to balance that, right? That you don't give too much to something else and less to something.
Right.
So you got to learn how to balance that, because you can be in the house again, but yet still absent.
Exactly.
And so again, when we talk about this manhood piece, what was your identity, what you saw growing up as a man from your father, whether they was present or absent, how did that affect your life?
So, backstory: never met either of my biological grandfathers, right? So, on my mom's side, he died abruptly from cancer while she was pregnant with me. My dad never met his biological father. So my grandmother fled that situation, is the way it was described to me, and got remarried. And so Johnny Mack was the man that, she remarried. So that's the grandfather that I knew. He wasn't my biological grandfather. So my father, cool brother, creative, heart of gold, just didn't know how to be a father. And I'm not just talking about financially. He just, whenever he was, I guess in a sense, forced to spend extended periods of time with us, he didn't know how to relate. And my stepfather, my mom divorced my dad, remarried when I was, I think, 5 or 6. Amazing provider, a model of consistency, but is from the silent generation. So we know how men from the silent generation, how they perceive manhood, how they perceive fatherhood, right? They work, they come home, get the big piece of chicken, grab the remote, and this is what it is, right? So I learned a lot from him from observation. His emotional intelligence in the sense of being, I guess, steadfast might be the word, unmoved by what was going on around him. He was always focused on, I got household account for him. So he didn't care if it was Bayou Classic or whatever who was doing for Essence. He didn't care about that.
Right.
He cared about the stability of his household. And so I just took the best of what both of those images brought to the table, right? So I took my dad's charisma, his creativity, his love of people, his compassion, and I took that with me. My stepdad, I took his work ethic, I took his consistency, I took his temperament to some extent, just being even keeled, and took that with me and decided whatever else that I didn't get, I was gonna formulate and then pass on, to the next generation. So, and I didn't say this in my introduction. So because of that experience, my oldest daughter, I adopted her. I never married her mother, but I adopted her because someone essentially did that for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I can remember when we initially started dating, and like any other responsible, quote unquote, single mother, she was very conscientious about not allowing anyone to interact with our child that wasn't going to be around. And just by life circumstances, that kind of accelerated with us early on. And one day, she just randomly called me daddy. My mom panicked. And in an instant, true story, in an instant, I said, don't worry about it. If we don't work out, but I don't know that I knew I was saying. I was in my early 20s. But I honor that, is my point. Because someone essentially did that for me. So that's what it did for me. And I started, I started my basketball teams, things like that. And so being a father figure to a lot of kids that just didn't have, kids in the household. So I go to your point, I don't necessarily just view it as something that is about, do you have kids? To me, it's a position in the community that we're all essentially filling outside of just the kids that we may have fathered.
Yes, sir.
It's an image.
But that's real big. That's real big, even of yourself. And we understood that this was something that I received and I'm willing to pass on, right? If we all thought that way. You get what I'm saying? And so you said something earlier as well, is about, I think when you talk about trying to hold man accountable for something that he has never experienced can be difficult. Because there's an expectation, but if I don't know what it is to do that or to be that, it's hard to hold me accountable to that.
Right.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so as far as I agree with everything everyone says so far. And for me, life was about experiences and examples as far as, fatherhood and different, men that I look at personally. So just kind of looking at my personal father, he taught me everything from the streets to the church. And it really helped me out a lot.
Hold up now. From where? from the street to the church?
From the streets to the church. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
And it helped me out in life to be more well-rounded, I would say. And of course, through my experiences, to build my faith into believing and trusting in God. And to your point, what you were saying too, as far as it's more of a community type thing, as far as even if you don't have a physical child, there's a lot of men that I looked up to as far as teachers, other great men of God that I followed a lot of their examples and their ways, and they took me underneath their wing and mentored me and different things of that matter. And all of that helped shape and form who I am today. And also it helps out with, how I relate to my own children and other people in the community, and how to understand different perspectives and be able to, communicate effectively, to different scenarios and different situations for younger generations.
Right.
For me, as far as identity, as far as for my father, I have probably one of the most strongest identities from him because we look just alike. So, like you said before, being distant, like having a father but being distant, from a father, that's kind of my situation. Like my father, he stays in Indiana, so he used to come and get me every summer. We spend time together and everything, and we have an awesome relationship. That's like my brother. That's my mentor. I look up to him always. All through life, I was told I look just like him. And over the years, as I get older, you start learning a lot of stuff that he did that I didn't understand when I was younger. He used to come and drive 11 hours to come get me and go back flying and everything. So I learned a lot from him. But like you said, being so far distant, I was only able to see him during the summertime.
Right.
So that's a big gap between school years and summertime. So a lot still was kind of missing from, us as a unit, because a lot of stuff we haven't had a chance, the opportunity to get together and do as father and son type thing. As an adult. But I love him to death, that's my ace, But I learned a lot from him, good and bad. He had a lot of different marriages and stuff like that. I ain't gonna get in detail with it, but he had a lot of different marriages, and I learned from it. We had to talk about it. We keep it 100. We had to talk about it. And just learning from him and him telling me what he did wrong, but I already knew just by observing from from observing from what he went through, from marriage to marriage and stuff like that. So that's what I did. When I used to have dreads, I used to want to have dreads and stuff like that, like him. And over the years, it was like I want my own identity as myself, as my own man, so I can pass on to my son or my daughter, and she's not going to see him; she's going to see me. So I learned a lot from him, and I don't take anything he did for granted, good and bad.
Absolutely.
Again, growing up, subconsciously, there's some things that we saw and was passed on to us that we didn't ask for.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we were not in a position where we could choose who our fathers were, who our mothers were. It was birthed into this thing, right? And so next question is it still possible to rear a child, be a father to a child, even if you're not in the home with them? And I think you was kind of touching on your situation with your father. How do you see? Because we have a lot of that right now. Mm-hmm. We like to call them blended families and all that.
Yeah.
I just call them family.
Yeah.
You're right. 'Cause we all blended. You're right. So what you say to that?
Let me share something. 2 words these 2 brothers spoke that triggered a thought, a frame of thinking that flows into what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He closed by saying image. Fatherhood is an image. And my brother there said he looked up to his father. You ever had a situation where you want to help somebody, but they're just not looking up?
Mm-hmm.
You know you can help them, but you can't get them to look up. You know you're the right thing for them, but they won't look up there. See, we all look up in some way to images. It's like you see guys looking up to fake images of so-called rapper who are thugs and they want that life. It's like, why are you looking up there?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the master key, what I've discovered. We talk about my father, the role he affected subconsciously. You know what my dad did for me? And I'm 50 years old and I'm looking back and I'm seeing this. He helped define my goals. Like I wanted to be a man like him. I wanted to be able to do multiple things. Like my dad, I thought he could cut hair, because it was 5 boys and 3 girls. So wasn't no going to the barber. So he had clippers back there, and I thought I was okay till I went to school and they started talking about my cut, my line. He was old school, take it all the way up around here.
We used to call it Dr. Ice.
Yeah. So I learned how to cut hair. I learned how to drive trucks, dump trucks, forklifts. You follow me?
Yeah.
He looked like they call that mother wit. He could do everything. It was like you got to have your own family. You got to be the man. You got to be the provider. And so that was that goal I had, right? Subconsciously, he's defining my goals. And here's the master key that we even teach in corporate America. Your goals define your mentors.
Yeah.
Your mentors don't define your goals. Until we can help people create and define their goals, get them to want certain things, they won't look up to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Your goals. So if you say my goal is this, and that, you're gonna go out and find those mentors to help you get there. But if we try to start with the mentor and there are no goals, it never works. So it's like, how do we get people to want certain things? And he spoke of image. What they see early.
Yeah.
Their belief system. Sometimes we can be the right image, but we're not visible.
Yeah.
We're not visible enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so others are visible. So that image got me looking up, and now my goals are being subconsciously women, fast money. You follow me?
Yeah.
Wanting to come easy.
Yeah.
Man, forget school, forget learning a trade, forget, stability, security. I like that fast life. Where did you get that from?
Right.
An image. We all are affected by what we see. So can we be successful, to your question about, with the father not in the home per se? Yes, if we understand how do we get to the child to help the child. Of course, first is always identity, understanding who you are, whose you are. Even if you feel fatherless, there is an eternal father, but you can't really tell the child that. You have to show them that. What's important in my home is that my children see me pray. I let them hear me pray for them when I talk to my eternal father. So it's not hard for my son to come along, and when I say you pray, and I hear him pray, I'm planting that seed. And the way to be fruitful is to be seedful. You simply have to seed into people enough for them to eventually bear out fruit. So if we can seed into identity, seed into helping them understand image, what images, you follow me, we want to project, then those goals, I think absolutely that we can be successful in that space, whether you're a biological father or you're part of that extended family.
How did you handle that? Because that's something that you dealt with.
Yeah,
Still dealing with.
And it might be hard for me to streamline my thoughts on this one because it's multi-pronged, so to speak. But I'll say the first thing was that when I decided to move on and I knew that the relationship wasn't going to work for either of us, right? I made a commitment in that instant to not allow my presence from a financial, emotional, or spiritual perspective to be lacking. Meaning, although we're no longer in an intimate relationship, we're still family. So I always treated their mother as such. And even early on, after the separation, and people are hurt, right? So some of their behavior may be slightly out of character. What I think a lot of men make a mistake is that they quote unquote match that energy.
Right, I agree.
Once you match that energy, you're setting the stage for you to be alienated, for the duration of that child's life. And so for me, it was, I'm going to overperform. So we're not going to have to go to court about nothing financial because you already know, right?
Right.
You know, what I'm doing is far beyond whatever my legal responsibility is. But that's not the threshold that we're trying to meet. We're trying to do what we would have done if we were there.
I agree.
Right. Which is the reason why when, you know, in this environment, and I'm pretty sure you hear these conversations, when you hear a brother, you know, that may be making whatever good money is and say, man, they taking $850 out of my check. And I'm thinking, come on, brother, that's not even covering daycare.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So financially, and then on the other side, so 17-year relationship. So it was another woman that was a part of raising those girls.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like it was my responsibility to model a certain behavior that set the tone on both sides. So we never had any problems.
Yeah.
We were always able to collaborate and in the best interest of the kids. So if it was a game, everybody cheering for the same, right? Everybody played a role in whatever's going on. And it's always been all good. But I personally believe when I hear men say woman scorn and women can be vindictive and things like that, I'm not trying to say that doesn't exist.
Right.
But I think that probably 80% of the time, the man was or is doing something that perpetuates that energy.
I agree.
There was, in my opinion, there was no way to bring that to the table because that's not what I was bringing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And, you know, the few times when we'd be, okay, well, we're going to meet up and, you know, they're going to come and then, you know, there was never any aggression.
Right.
I always met that with a level of empathy and compassion, understanding that maybe she just wasn't there yet.
Right.
And it didn't take long for her to get there. And then once we hit that stride, never had any issues. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, yeah, you can, but it has to be a fluid situation.
Mm-hmm.
For me, all of that, you got them on Mondays and Tuesdays and every other weekend, and I got them this Christmas. We never had to have those conversations because it was always fluid. It was always fluid. So what's in the child's best interest?
Right.
You know what I mean? So if I got more flexibility and there's this practice and that, you know, tutoring and whatever's going on, and, you know, she needed to be with me for 2 weeks, then she's with me for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And you know, there was just never those barriers or those, you know, overly structured agreements that I think sometimes hurt the relationship.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely. You said something, and I think a lot of times matching that, because sometimes you get that. You know, you're gonna get it, but it's how you respond to it.
absolutely, you're gonna get it if you're in the house with
That's
them.
right. You got it. That's
So, I
right.
mean, you
That's
know.
right. And so it's about, that's real big though, because many people wouldn't have handled that way, because a lot of times when you see if someone feel that you're trying to take advantage or trying to get over is what we be thinking, and so we're gonna meet. I ain't gonna let you just handle me, and then you end up now because you're not willing to take some. You now separate yourself from the best interest of your child that needs you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been through that. So, I mean, I'm married now, but I had kids before I got married. But that was one thing I established when I got my first marriage and only marriage. But I established that coming in, we're not going to deal like this.
Right.
You know, we're not going to do this. Is my wife.
Right.
Right. And we don't have no relation, so I ain't got to be trying to trip.
Right.
There's child support and all this. If that's your decision to do that, that's your decision. But I've always taken care of my kids. So, but if you want to do that to try to get back, then that's your choice. But I'm not going to match that, like you just said.
Right.
I'm not going to go back and forth. You say, well, they ain't coming. I'm not going to be mad with you. And to this day, on one hand, you know, with my children I have now, I'm the greatest father in the world. You know, because they got a chance to get all of that. You know, on the other hand, my older kids, they're grown now. And we had a conversation the other night. We talked about 3 a.m. Just talking to my daughter. And they just started bringing up stuff. And it just made me appreciate more that God gave me the opportunity to right some wrongs.
Right, yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Because it could easily be they don't want to deal with me. You know, because I'm looking at where you are in life now, what you have, and what about us? Where were we? I don't have to deal with that. And I'm grateful because I deal with families that deal with that. You know what I'm saying? So it's challenging, man.
I think the other thing, and not to
No, you good.
but the other thing is that if you have to move on from a marriage or a relationship or whatever the case is, and you find yourself in a new relationship, on some level, that person has to prioritize those kids. And that's one thing I can say I was blessed.
Yeah.
And the reason why Tina and I lived the last 16, 17 years is because I give any, when my oldest daughter, when we dropped her off at college, the person that was crying the hardest was Tina.
I agree. Yeah.
Why is she all the way up in, and so, but that was the climate around the relationship.
Yeah.
It was, if anyone was spoiling them or whatever, you know what I mean? A lot of times it was coming from there. She didn't see him as anything but her own. So that was a big help
That's
too,
major.
because then, their mother can see that, and she's a woman of God. So,
right.
I
can
she's
trust
going to
that.
yield to that.
Yeah.
She's going to yield to that.
Yeah. How do you think financially, if a man is not stable, how do you think that affects him as a man and as a father?
Well, I mean, finances is very important. I'm gonna say that, but I just believe this: if you're working, you should be supporting your children. That's bottom line. If you're not working, you know what I'm saying, you should be hustling, trying to legally though. Hustling.
Make that play.
I gotta clarify that. Hustling to make sure you provide for your children. As you doing for yourself. And even if you're not employed, I just believe, you should be actively, looking to gain employment to provide, as far as, I guess, the income levels, as far as, how you provide, that's important, as far as, well, it's important, but the main thing is that you provide in some sort. And if it's not, if you can't support as much financially, but you can pick up in other areas, and that can make up the difference. Because honestly, you can have a person who's financially great, but honestly just poor in moral character or integrity, and you don't want to necessarily pass those things down to your children as far as those seeds. So it's always a balance with everything. Of course, you definitely want to support them financially, but you definitely want to make sure you balance it off with with the character and more support as well.
Okay. What if from a husband even wife standpoint, even being in the home, now some women are financially, from career, they're making a little more money than the man. So do you think that can affect the dynamics of that relationship?
It will all depend on the maturity level of the man in the context of, the woman making more. So maturity level is everything. Sometimes we try and give manhood principles to boys. So it doesn't work. We actually can create more frustration by telling you to perform a certain way and you don't have it in you to perform. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So maturity is everything. So every man has to work on himself. You have to do your own evaluation assessment. Where do I lack maturity? You and I have talked about emotionally healthy leadership and this whole assessment. Am I an emotional infant, an emotional adolescent, or am I emotionally mature? Right? And so that's important for that man. And then secondly, how do we define success? What is the success criteria of the home? Is it just money?
That's good.
Then if it's money, then that's going to always be an issue because it's like, hey, I'm the most successful.
Yeah.
Problematic now. So it is looking at how do we define success from our value system, the non-negotiables, the foundation of how we define life.
Yeah.
And so there has to be an umpire, if you will, that calls the rules. And this is where your theology has to inform your ideology, your lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah.
If not, it'll be defined by what the culture says is success and what is not. You follow me? Yeah. And that's the leadership of every household. And I place that burden on the man. How you want to define success? Because in most marital situations, the man gives the woman his last name. Now, if and think about that, goes all the way back to God telling Adam, bringing the woman to Adam to see what he would call it. You define her.
Yeah.
We give now if you're gonna give
That's
the
the way to
wife
get us
your
in trouble.
Yeah.
not that everybody follows that, but if you're gonna give her your last name, you can define her by name, but you can't define what success looks like in your home. Nobody forces you to choose a wife. So you choose her, and now she creates frustration for you, but it's because you haven't clearly defined what is success in this house. And you lead from your identity. You follow me?
Yeah.
You lead from your identity, and you don't allow money to define you. And then, God is now free to give it to you.
Let me say this.
Clear.
Because obviously there's a ton of data out there about the percentage of, unwed mothers in our communities. And when we say fatherless homes, I don't mean, that the man has to necessarily live there, but
Right.
he has to account for that family. And I think a lot of it's symptomatic of, social and economic issues in our communities, right? And so to the point you just made when you said, if we give essentially manhood principles to someone that is not equipped to act on it. So when we talk about there's a child on the way, that is the definition of what you described, right? Because you can't swag your way through it,
Exactly.
right? There's nothing pretentious that's gonna get you through it. Nothing shallow is gonna get you through it. The only thing you have to draw from is that foundation.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, then now it's fight or flight. So if you feel inadequate, if you feel unequipped, if you got essentially low self-esteem, it may be covered by the fact that you can attract women or that you got a nice vehicle or whatever the case is, you got a nickname, everybody know you, you scored touchdowns in high school, whatever, right? Man, none of that.
Image.
None of that. It's not gonna help you to be a good father.
Right.
And so I think what happens with a lot of men is that when they feel that emotion of fight or flight and they assess where they are spiritually, financially, socially, emotionally, the whole nine, it's easier to either deny the child or maybe accept the child in theory, but not have to be there consistently. Because if you got to be there consistent, then again, it goes back to those three core responsibilities, and you go to sleep with that at night. You know what I mean? And I just think a lot of men just don't feel adequate to step up to that, to the plate on that. And so I would say if there is someone out there listening that they haven't been active in their child's life because of that emotion that I'm describing, or they got a child on the way and they're not sure to what extent they want to be involved, is that you got to push through the burn, right? So it ain't no different than lifting weights. Like you got to get reps in, you got to tear that muscle down, and when you go back, you can get a few more in. It's the same thing with fatherhood. Early on, if you're not someone that's middle-aged and well-established and emotionally, well-developed and all of that type of stuff, you're a young father. Okay, you're gonna struggle early on.
Yeah.
The money probably ain't abundant. If your father wasn't there, you may not know exactly how this thing's supposed to look. But you being there, even at 40% of what your capacity is better than you not being there.
Yes.
And no matter even if the woman makes you feel inadequate because you can't contribute as much financially as you would like, you just got to push through that burn because you'll eventually get there. I do believe that for me, fatherhood was kind of my North Star, so to speak. It's guided me.
Yeah.
And it sharpened my decision making. It improved my work ethic. It gave me vision and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you could say it's a selfless thing, but selfishly, I feel like it, what I'm saying? It kind of put me on, So if anybody out there is feeling that, man, look, stick around and push through it. You'll eventually you'll figure the money part out, but if you're not there, you can't make up for that time.
Man, you can't get that back.
And to add, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
And to add to what y'all said, pride. As far as a man, your pride. Sometimes we want to let our pride down. You got the woman. She makes more in the family. You feel like your pride is built up. You can't allow her to take care of the household as far as with her income, as much making more than you. But like you say, you gotta have a balance. You gotta have a balance between two.
Can I say this about the woman? Offer another perspective. I used to say, I wish I did have a wife that made more than me. In my household, I always paid all the bills. My wife had never had to pay any bill, never been responsible for anything. I even give her gas money.
Right.
And however, though, my confidence, my identity is not in, my ability to do that. Because I've always told my wife, you are actually my conduit to the blessing of the Lord. My wife has always been the reason I'm successful. The Bible says when a man finds a wife, he finds a good thing and obtaineth favor.
Yes.
She's my conduit to favor. So as I love her, he increases me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
A man is a producer. A woman is a reproducer. You give a woman a battle, she'll give you a storm. You follow me? A war. You give her, some rain, she'll give you a tsunami. You give her a seed, she gives you back a baby. Nothing can compete with the reproductive nature of a woman. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a man has to now know what to do with that capability from God. The Bible says the woman is the glory of the man. She's the correct estimation of man. A man doesn't know who he is until he sees a woman. This is why the enemy has always attacked, you follow me? The manhood identity, if you will. It's been under attack from the beginning of time. And to create this gender neutral society so we all lose our identity and or our value. Because value is determined by difference. Value is determined by difference. You put two purses there, and one is a Louis Vuitton, the other is a Michael Kors. No diss to Michael Kors, but the woman will know the difference. Because Louis Vuitton has made a differentiation that we must be different. I think we have lost that sense of value by creating that distinction. You follow me? So we can now better appreciate male versus female. You follow me? And the distinct difference. So if that woman is able to produce it, that's great. And I married her. I'm still your covering. Right. You follow me? Right. And so that's great, but don't take her away from that, because some women are very good in the home and very good out in the marketplace. Right. We help them with balance. We wash her with words. You follow me? We are always edifying, building up, because that's our bride. You just got to know how to love a woman and let her be herself. And if she can go do that, that's still you. It's like running a business. You're running a household.
Hire some people smarter than you.
It's a house of people smarter than you. There you go. You ought to marry a woman smarter than you. You ought to want to raise your children to be smarter than you. Well, one day they can come back and take care of you. That's a perspective.
Man, when you think about, it takes a man that has identity, to be able to accept that. You get what I'm saying? That's confident within himself and know that, hey, I'm not dealing with low self-esteem issues. Because it can be very intimidating to a man, because when you think about money, with money comes control. And
leverage.
Yes. And most men don't want to be under the thumb of that woman if she's a little more financially successful. And that's why you hear some women say, well, financial women say they can't find men because most men are intimidated, by them. Not all men. Right. But that's what's being said. And so I'm working on where you are, though, Pastor. You starting something nice. That's well, how important, and we're going to wind it down, how important is faith? How important is faith, relationship with God, to you being that father and being that man?
It's very important. when I look at somebody, when I look at a man, I want to see God in him, and that's gonna trickle down from the family to the family. Because the man, like you said, the man is gonna lead, the woman gonna follow. So that will, trickle down the family, and yeah.
What do you say to that?
Without faith, then it would be my responsibility to come up with all the answers, and I don't have it.
Yeah.
So that's the source.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That it's very simply put. That's the source.
Yeah.
In all areas.
Faith is very important, first and foremost. And as I grew into my young adulthood, and as I started getting more teachings as far as about God and the faith, it really showed me a true example of what a father does. And pretty much the definition of a father is, providing or taking care of their children by any means for the most part, So just looking at how, as far as how Jesus relates to the church, as far as in the faith realm, it really shows how he cared and how he provided, how he loved for his children. So through that example, as far as how faith is important, it gives me a model, even if I didn't necessarily have a physical model, to really model behind as far as how God went about with us.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say faith is a function, not a feeling. And to everyone's point about God being the source, faith is exemplary in how you carry yourself. Your discretion, prudence, and discretion shall preserve a man. Longevity is in his judgment. How you make decisions, that is giving full expression to your faith. When you take risks, launch a business, because you're in covenant, the God of the Bible. Now, of course, there's faith in many things, but if there's faith in God of the Bible, then the God of the Bible is a God of covenant. So you now have a covenant with God. Yeah. And once you understand the covenant, then you give full expression to your understanding of that covenant, your faith in the one who keeps his covenant, looks over his covenant, and how you take risks, how you say, let's go to bed, we ain't gonna worry about that, right? You look in your child's eye and say, you can learn, you can achieve, you will overcome this. Mm-hmm. That's faith. It's the function of giving full expression that I'm in covenant with God. Yeah. And in order to be in authority, one must be submitted to authority. We understand these principles in law enforcement, in the military, but sometimes we fail to understand that in the social order of life. So when we talk about faith, it's great. It's easier to respect a man who's submitted to authority. When I know what authority you're submitted to, then I can appreciate your authority.
Yeah. Yeah. Faith is so, man, when you think about, your wife or your children, I can allow, everything is not painted beautifully before my children. Right. I want them to see some of the things that we struggle with. Right. And so they can also see how we handle it. Right. Because we're not going to always be here. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I want you to have faith in God.
Who you trust.
I want you to be able to trust him. Because that's who daddy trusts. That's right. That's who mom trusts. So one of the most gratifying things for me was for my wife to tell me that, and she said, I've never seen a man with much faith, as much faith as you have. And that was big for me because that's something I always moved. I moved on some crazy stuff. Some stuff my wife used to say, some of it wasn't faith, it was foolishness, right? But I trust God in a place because he's proven himself, right? When I didn't know what to do, didn't know how it was going to happen, I trust God and believe God and told her that he's going to provide. I said, God, it's on you to do it now. I done set the stage. Mm-hmm. You got to come through, right? Because I'm limited, right? And that's what I always teach my wife and my children so that they can understand that I depend on my source as well. I have faith in my God, my Father. And so it helps me to, extend that same faith. And so they see that. Man, we're about to get out of here, but I want to ask you all one more thing. We've been dealing with this COVID-19. It's been something we've been dealing with now over a year, probably coming up on 2 years now. How has it affected your life as a father, as a man, post and pre-COVID? What has happened? What has changed for the better? Let me say that, as it relates to family.
I know before the quarantine, I was working offshore, always gone, always doing this, always busy, not spending as much time as I should. And quarantine really got me closer,
Yeah.
and got me to understand each person in the house as we spend time, knowing things, just small, simple things that I noticed that I would have never noticed being gone all the time. Spending a lot of time together, playing games, whatever it is, playing games, working out. Me and my wife during the quarantine, we worked out. We was probably in a better shape during quarantine than any other time.
Right.
Just finding peace, staying home, not engaging in too much into too many people. It really was comforting for me.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll say that first. Well, prior to COVID, man, I could possibly say that between my wife and I, we run hard, and we was just busy doing this, doing that. We had our hands in all kinds of different things. I was working pretty much 7 days a week personally, but at the same time, even if I was to get home late, like let's say I might leave the shop 9 o'clock at night or leave rehearsal or whatever late in the evening. When I get home, sometimes my daughter she'll still be up. I make time to talk with her. How was your day? How was this and that? I still make a little time with her, but it wasn't necessarily really quality time, if that makes sense. So I remember during that time when everything shut down, it took everything. We was out of work for about 4 months as far as with the shop. I'm a musician also as well, so physically I wasn't necessarily playing music at the church. A lot of our real estate stuff that pretty much slowed down. I was in the house all day. And it drove me crazy for a second. But I can say this though, just like what my boy Marley was saying, you start doing things together, you start noticing different things that you probably would have noticed before, because you're gone all the time or whatever. But, during the quarantine, it really slowed things down for me where, we started doing just at home outdoor activity. And I remember at one point, me and my daughter, my wife, and kids, we'll go outside with draw the hopscotch board or whatever. We hopscotch, and we did simple things like that, jump rope. Me and my son, we were working out together. My wife as well. Able to sit back, watch the movies, talk, have really, great conversations, and it was even in the pandemic, even if it was bad, it was also needed. So there's always some good from that we take from the bad.
Right.
So that's where I really gained from that, and it carries on to this day. So when we came back to work and everything, I made a decision mentally just not to get so wrapped up in business and in life in general. As of lately, I've been taking off several Saturdays just to travel with my son to his basketball team, and just making sure. I know. Definitely. But as being self-employed, just in general, I want to work, of course, and do this and do that, whatever. But my priorities had shifted.
Yes.
When it came down to post quarantine, because everybody probably had someone that they know or loved that actually was affected by this. So it really put life in God and everything in perspective. Nothing is really more than this value over this. As far as with your family. So, and that was one of the biggest takeaways as far as with the pandemic. I really brought into my life as far as really getting more of a balance with work and my family, and making that time, not necessarily like I was saying earlier, coming home late at night and checking up on him and trying to get a quick conversation. And all right, I love you, bye bye. No,
Yeah.
that's not gonna cut it.
Right.
Got to do more. So I started stepping up and doing more.
I think for me it was because in the teeth of the pandemic, all we had was the moment. We couldn't plan anything. Couldn't plan what we was gonna do with our businesses and careers. We couldn't plan vacations. So all we had was the moment. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna embrace that, and I'm not gonna let it go when we return to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
So I do think that I've learned how to be more in the moment. At the same time, and this might sound like a contradiction, one of the most prevalent thoughts in my mind was that, man, look, it doesn't matter what industries are being eliminated, what jobs being eliminated, what's going on economically. My responsibility as a man doesn't change. So complacency, sometimes, and even when we think we own it, so there was so many different things that I took for granted that I was like, wow, we're not as insulated as I may have thought we were. So I think that's kind of the combination for me, is understanding that maybe we're back to some sense of normalcy, but the world will continue to evolve in real time. You know what I mean? Whereas, we used to be able to set something in motion and we might get 5 years of mileage out, or whatever that is. Pick a topic. It's over for that.
Yeah.
It's changing in real time.
Yeah.
So it's like you gotta figure out how to continuously be evolving so that you and your family can be okay regardless of the climate, but at the same time still be present and enjoy the moment. So that was the takeaway for me.
Well, I'll keep it brief. One was balance. It affected our family more with balance, right? I'm from the country, so I was glad when everything shut down and nobody was placing a demand on me, and I can get a fire pit and sit out in my backyard and talk to my kids, and then take what God is at work doing in his providence and talk to them about mortality. That he was running the universe before we got here. He'll be running it when we're gone. And then how to deal with the uncertainty of life. It became a teachable moment about how all things can shut down. I had to bury my oldest brother who died of COVID. I prayed for our home that no one would be infected by it. I caught COVID, didn't even know I had it until the last day I went to go get tested. They said, you got COVID in your body. And nobody in my house got sick. So that was a teachable moment about the sovereignty of God, faith in God. You follow me?
Yeah.
So balance was one, health was one, because I began to now talk to them about having strong immune systems, because kids like to eat junk, and I could never get them to cut out the sugar late at night but that pandemic helped me big time with vegetables, drinking more water. So I was able to talk about health and balance. So it, all in all, God is faithful, and I'm grateful we're on the backside of it.
Amen. And for us, it brought balance as well. I always said I never want to save the world and lose my family.
That's right.
So it brought balance. Me and the wife started riding bikes, doing stuff that we normally wouldn't do. And also it taught me to do some things that I didn't think I could do. So we grew in the midst of it as well. When we think about all of this, summing it up, and being a father and being a man, we all need a father to look up to. And whether we're a biological father, we don't have one, God is still our father. And we can look up to him to get that identity, to get that image that he was talking about earlier, because we're created in the image of God and in his likeness. And so he's the greatest example. He's the source. And so if you and I, these men here on this panel tonight, we're only examples of what God's grace looks like. And our goal is to create a platform, more of this, so that we can see some men in a positive light, and so that we don't allow the stigma of this world to tell us what a man is or what a father should be. So I'm grateful and thankful for you, men. You fathers, thank you all so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here with us. I want to do this again. And so I want to kind of do this again, man, and where we can really dive into some other topics. I think it's a variety of topics we need to talk about as men, and so that we can become what God desires for us to be. Once again, thank you all so much for being with us. Our prayer tonight, as always, is something has been said, that your faith has been heightened and your outlook bright. God bless you. God keep you. That is our prayer. Go in peace. Thank you, gentlemen. Cut.
No problem, man. I appreciate
I
it.
sure appreciate you all.
Appreciate it.
Oh, man, it was nice.
Was it good?
Oh, yeah.
Always a great experience.
It's an experience, man.
It was an experience for you? I know you.
Yeah.